there and welcome everybody. I'm Cindy Daychuck with Queen Bee Creations, and today's video was inspired by a thrifted find. So I found this pile for $3.49. This was less 30%. Okay, let's just say less than $3 because I don't want to do the math. And ultimately, it ends up spelling do what you love. And they're kind of raised letters. Can you see? So they're not going to sit flush. They're going to sit raised from the surface. So I thought it would be cool to just kind of combine this with an old cabinet door that I had taken off of some other project and just kind of build a sign. And here we have, this just came right off. So it's falling apart. Put that off to the side and save that. And I want to ultimately take this hardware off, but I'm not going to agonize over filling that. I'll probably put that toward the bottom. But I am going to have to get some wood filler and fill this up. So the idea is that we're going to zhuzh the board up, and so then we can attach our letters and we've got a nice finished sign. So I'm going to pop the hardware off. I'm going to wood fill this and I'm going to paint it white. So that's our starting place. So just know that, it's going to look white when it comes back, and there's raw edges to have to do because wherever this was probably a lower cabinet and they don't bother to paint the bottoms of this. So that's all that's going to happen off camera. But you guys know how to paint it white. So 2 coats of white, possibly 3 if the brown shows through too much. But apart from that, then we're good to go. I'm just popping on here quickly to show you what bleed through looks like. And I'm hoping that you can see it. So if I don't jiggle, I've painted the outside white. It looks cream. It looks like nicotine. So the white that I'm adding on is exactly the same color. You can see the difference, but it's going to go before I've even started that next row. You can see it's already turning color. This happens to be nicotine bleed through. So I'm just going to finish putting this coat on just for the sake of consistency, but I'm going to have to get out a heavy duty primer, one with shellac, because there's a built-in sealer. I'm using Fusion right now, but it's not up to this standard with how much this is changing color. And it's just incredible how quickly something like the nicotine happens, that before I've even moved on to the next row, that first row doesn't even look white anymore. So I'm going to get this on, let it dry, seal it with another primer, and one with more heavy duty shellac in it, and then I can do my final coat. Now that my board is ready, before I attach my lettering, I want to zhuzh it up a little bit. And I gotta tell you, so here's the surprising thing with this, is you saw the bleed through, you saw how quickly the white just turned caramel. That is almost always a sign of nicotine. You have to put a stain blocker onto that. One of the best stain blockers out there is just plain shellac. So I actually took it out and I sprayed shellac over the whole piece, painted it white, got bleed through still. Not as bad, but bleed through. So I had to wait for that coat of paint to dry, did another coat of shellac, painted on another coat of white, still got bleed through. Fainter, but bleed through. I did another coat of shellac and another coat of white, and I still have faint bleed through. And I'm okay with that. I'm going, it's a sign. It's not a big deal. So what I do have are some leftover florals from projects that I've been working on as I work my way through Collage des Fleurs transfer from IOD. And so I'm still using it up. And I'm going to work on kind of a bit of a layout here, but I want it to extend up and over some of the edging. So I'm because I've got the frame coming up, I'm kind of manipulating this. I'm holding this away so that I can get this bottom part on, and that I can now start to kind of roll my transfer up and over those edges. If I just laid it down straight, and sorry, you might not always see my head, but we don't care. If I had just laid it down flat, then I would have had major gaps here. So if you're working on something like this, where you want it to come up and over your edges, kind of hold it up out of the way like you saw me do. Get part of the main part stuck down, so then you can go and get it moving up over those curves and those arches a little bit better. And I will say, this is one of those situations too, that after you remove the plastic, you're going to want to burnish this down really well. Just a couple of spots there that didn't release. There we go. And so to burnish this, I take that shiny white and I take it over all of it and really give it a really good rub, especially in those creases. And that just helps you give that continuous look going up and over those curved edges. And those are the most challenging part of doing something built into kind of a frame, is just being able to ensure that you get those pieces sticking in a way that makes sense for it. There we go. So it's not hard, it's just a little bit picky. And usually your transfers are so easy that you're not used to something having to be a little bit more challenging, but bear with it and it'll work just great. And I really love the look of things like this, where you're extending up and over the frame, that you're using all of it as kind of your canvas. I just want to get these on because just putting those words on, this all started from those thrifted metal words, but just putting the words onto that plain white background would be kind of boring. So I want to take advantage of it, and that's one of the reasons I did white. One, because then the letters would stand out really well, but then also I could add some embellishments like this to it to make it a much nicer looking little decor piece. There we go. Now I put the two big flowers down because those were my big elements. I do have some ivy that I think I'm going to be using. It's going to come up in all those creases as well. So again, a little bit more challenging. But I want to make sure that I've got it coming up so it definitely looks like it's coming. Maybe I'll have it here, up out of my flower. And you can see me pushing it into all of the edging first and getting that on. Because I used Fusion Mineral Paint to paint this, it has the built-in sealer, so the transfers go on really easily because they love a sealed surface. Doesn't mean you can't attach them onto a surface that's not sealed. It's just going to be a little bit more work. I've had great success putting them onto flat textured fabrics, and I didn't have to seal with a medium first. There we go. Just right in that corner is a little more challenging, but I liked the look of it going there, so. All right, so you've got the idea of how to do it into those curved surfaces. And don't forget the burnishing. I'm using my nails to kind of push into each of those little crevices too, so that you've got them fully adhered. So what I am going to do is finish getting them attached. I'm going to give them a coat of top coat, let it dry, and then we'll come back for attaching and laying out our words. Okay, now that these are on, top coat's dry, I can take my letters. So I just want to roughly lay them out. Do what? I might like that T coming over a little bit. The D coming up a little bit. U. Love. So I don't want to have this one come over because then it just looks repetitive. But I do need to space this. Okay, so I have two of them that don't stand up flat. So I will, when I glue them, add a little, I just have little pieces of dowels that I cut off. And I'm going to take E6000 and do a fairly substantial little dollop on each. And just make sure I'm kind of placing it where I want. And then I will need to leave this overnight to dry. Okay, here's our finished sign. Do what you love. Now, this was just inspired by a thrift store find. I mean, I never anticipated making a sign and with the letters, but they were just kind of cool. I like the fact that they were raised. It lent itself to doing something like this. Super easy little project. You could handwrite lettering like this. You could, if you have a Cricut or a Silhouette, you could cut out vinyl lettering. You could stencil on the lettering. I mean, really, the only thing that was painful about this was the amount of bleed through that happened. But sometimes that's what's going to happen. You don't know the provenance of every piece of furniture that you may pick up. It may smell fine, but when you start to paint, man, that nicotine, it's immediate. So I get that there's bleed through like oils and things that after you've painted a coat or two, then they start to leach up. The nicotine happens instantaneously. I hope that you could see, I haven't watched the replay to be able to see if you could see on the video that as I was painting, the white was already turning that kind of caramel color. And it is really painful to have to cover that. I mean, I was going to straight shellac to cover it, and I was still having to do multiple coats. So when you run into that with maybe a piece of furniture that you were doing, just stop right away. And if you're doing it for a client or customer, I phone them right away and I say, look, you need to know before I go any further that this is what's happening, and it's going to take perhaps multiple coats of a shellac sealer, shellac based primer, to be able to cover this. Because one, it's an additional expense with just the primer and the shellac. That's perhaps an additional product that you weren't anticipating using, but it's also how many coats and how much of your time factors into the cost of that item or that product. If you're doing it for yourself and it's something that you really love, well, okay, cool. You might have to be doing multiple coats, but you don't mind the investment of time so much. But if you run into it when you're working maybe on a customer piece or like a custom piece, just contact the customer right away and start to explain what's going on and whether or not they're willing to make the investment, or else just stop, because you don't know how many coats it's going to take. This smelled fine. This looked fine. It was just an old cabinet door. It was sealed, right? So this was sealed, like factory shiny finish, and still. So you never know. So simple little project, except for that one little hiccup. But stuff like that happens all the time, and you have no control over it. I'm going to add some hanging hardware onto this, just, so it's usable, but it's finished. Let me know what you think of this one, guys. Let me know if you've run into bleed through horror stories. I'm more than happy to hear from you and commiserate with you because I've had my fair share. This was a small little project, but when you got the big ones and it's happening, not so much fun. Thanks for tuning in as always. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And until then, take care.